Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you've been enjoying the show so far. My name is David Pyatt, Principal Specialist Solutions Architect here at AWS. With me is Sean Lambert, Senior Specialist Solutions Architect, also dedicated to VMware Cloud and AWS. Today we're going to take a look at some migrations in motion. Now, before we get into a live demo of what these migrations actually look like, let's take a quick look at what you get out of the box with the VMware Cloud and AWS service. Typically, when we work with customers who are using the service, we're going to start with their workloads in their on-premises data center. And typically in these on-premises data centers, they're going to be running VMware-based workloads. Now, on the AWS side, the VMware Cloud and AWS service comes with the following ingredients out of the box. You're going to get the vSphere hypervisor. Hopefully that's not a surprise to those of you that are here. You're going to get vSAN for storage, and you're going to get NSX for the software-defined networking piece. Now, with the service, you have the ability to connect your on-premises vSphere workloads with your VMware Cloud on AWS workloads. You can pair them together using something called hybrid linked mode. And you can manage both of these sites in a single pane of glass. Now, many of our customers also have VMware ARIA tools, formerly known as vRealize, for some of their automation. Now, that same tooling is going to work with VMware Cloud and AWS as well. In addition, if you've got PowerShell scripts, for example, those tools are also going to work with your VMware Cloud and AWS environment. Now, because the VMware Cloud on AWS service is running on top of the AWS global infrastructure, it's also sitting next to the 200 plus other AWS services. So for example, if you've got VMware-based virtual machines in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment that need to communicate with, for example, Amazon EC2 instances, or maybe an S3 bucket, or an RDS instance, all of these things can communicate with one another because they're all just AWS services. Now, with the VMware Cloud and AWS service, there's another piece of software that comes with it, which is HCX, or Hybrid Cloud Extension. Now, this is a VMware tool that allows for the migration of VMware-based virtual machines. Now, this tool has a couple different migration modes baked into it. If you're familiar with VMware technology, you can do something as simple as a storage vMotion to migrate your virtual machines. You can also do something as simple as just a cold migration, where you're going to reboot your VMs on the other side. What most of our customers do for the bulk of their workloads is something called a bulk migration. And what bulk migration allows you to do is migrate up to 200 virtual machines at a time. Now, this tool works with on-premises vSphere versions, some versions of 6, vSphere 6, vSphere 7, and vSphere 8. Now, when you deploy this tool, what's going to happen is it's going to run in your VMware Cloud on AWS environment, and it's going to also deploy some appliances in your on-premises vSphere environment. Once this is deployed, and you go through and configure it, you will have the ability to now migrate your virtual machines bidirectionally between your on-premises environment and your VMware Cloud on AWS software-defined data center, or SDDC. So we're going to take a look at some migrations in real time. So Sean, if you would.
Thanks, David. So what we've got here as we switch to the demo, we've got, as David said, when you deploy a software-defined data center, you have the option of also deploying HCX. HCX is a pre-deployed service, and so as you go to deploy this, it's actually going to be running inside of your software-defined data center. What we have here is we have two different data centers. One is running in Oregon, and the other one is running in Northern California. We're going to treat this migration from on-premises, which is going to be in SDDC-B, and we're going to be migrating workloads into SDDC-A. In order to be able to do this, we have an HCX console. You can access the HCX console via a plugin that's embedded in vCenter, or you can access this console via its own browser. What you see here when you get into HCX is your dashboard. This gives you an idea of how many VMs you've migrated, how many migrations are in progress, and other analytics that you can see if you're interested in how your migrations are going. In order to be able to migrate, we create what is called a site pair. A site pair joins these two data centers together and creates a communication path that allows us to deploy what we call an interconnect, or an IX. David showed the overall architecture in an earlier slide, but what we have here is this interconnect is a encrypted bridge that allows us to move VMs from one data center into another. David also talked about the different appliances that are deployed as a part of this. This is where you see the different services that are deployed that allow us to do a migration. A lot of our customers want to know how long is it going to take to migrate these VMs. We have transport analytics that are built into HCX, so we can see how many bulk migrations, for example, we can do at one time. We can do up to 210 here. The one thing to note with a bulk migration, the key reason why our customers use this is because you can do migrations in parallel. If you're familiar with traditional vSphere vMotion, those are done in serial, so one at a time. So the biggest benefit to bulk is that we can move several VMs all at once. There's another part here you can go and you can see the minimum bandwidth and maximum bandwidth available to you, as well as the loss in between these two connections with this interconnect. But what we want to do today is show these migrations real time. So I'll go into what RAV or replication-assisted vMotion and bulk migration is, but first we want to kick off a traditional vMotion using HCX. So when we come into this workload portability window, it's going to recognize this site connection once again. So we're going to have an option to select SDDC-B, which is on premises, going to SDDC-A. If you have non-vSphere workloads, you can use what is called a Sentinel appliance, which converts, for example, other third-party virtualization formats into a VMware format. But for this demo, we're going to be using an HCX vMotion to be able to do this migration. So once it's going to pull both vCenters, and it's going to give us an idea of where we need to set the destination. When we do a migration, we have to be able to tell it where it needs to go. So in order to be able to do this, I'm going to select a VM. I'm going to select Linux VM2. I'm going to add it to this group to be able to move. When we do a migration, we have to tell the VMs where we want it to go. So we need to pick some resource pools here. We also need to determine what storage it's going to land on. Because we're evacuating one data center to another, we're also performing a storage vMotion here. Migration profiles, these are the three different types that we have available to us. We're going to use a vMotion, and then we're going to tell HCX which VM we want to put this into. You have different source formats available to you. We're going to use the same format as the source, which is thin provisioning in this example. If you have a switchover schedule, which I'll go to in a moment with a different type of migration, you can set your actual cutover as a part of this process. Many of our customers want to do maintenance as a part of their migration, so we have some extended options that are available to you. If you want to upgrade your virtual hardware, if you want to upgrade your VMware tools, for example, there are many customers with different workloads. They have custom attributes that they need to apply to their VMs as a part of this migration, so we allow them to select these custom attributes as a part of that. Once you select how you want to migrate, for the sake of this example, one thing that we're doing is we have also created a layer 2 extension, which I'll show you in a moment. So as a part of this demonstration, I'm going to move a VM from Oregon to California, but I'm also going to ping this same VM from another VM that's sitting in Portland. And so we're going to see the ping continue, and it's not going to drop. Once I've selected this migration, I'm going to select Go, and then the migration will kick off at this point. We have two different vCenters here that I'll be showing you. The white one is on premises, and then the dark mode here is the cloud SDDC. So we've got two different vCenters here that we're working within. As I have started the migration from Linux 2, I'm also going to bring up Linux 1. And with Linux 1, I'm going to pay attention to what this IP address is right here, and I'm going to start pinging it from Linux VM 1 here. I'll refresh the screen. So I'm going to ping this IP address. Keep in mind the milliseconds here, so we've got sub-millisecond latency going on right now, but we also have a migration happening. As I go back to my HCX portal here, I want to go through some other migrations that have already been successful today. As a part of bulk migration that David talked about earlier, I've moved these six VMs all at once as a part of bulk. What you see here as a part of this migration is you will be able to see the source network that it moved from and what it's going across, so this layer 2 extension that we're using. You can also see that we've asked it to retain the MAC address, so those customers that want to retain MACs, they're going to be able to do that as a part of this migration. For those of you that want to audit and understand what is going on during this migration, you can see all of the events that go into a migration, and so there's an audit trail to where you can get back to your infrastructure teams should something go wrong. A large benefit for customers around HCX migrations, specifically bulk, is that we leave a copy of the VM at the source site, even though it's been migrated to the destination. And the way that it's done is as I go to the cloud software-defined data center, I can see Linux VMs 6 through 10. If I go back to on-premises, I have a VMs migrated to cloud folder. When the migrations have been completed, the source copy is going to stay here in this folder with an appended alpha numbers at the end, or numeric numbers at the end, excuse me. These VMs are here as long as I want them to be. So if a migration goes bad and I need to be able to recover it, I can go back to my source VMs, turn them back on, and then I can troubleshoot the issue and then migrate again. So many of our customers appreciate this fail-safe, if you will, of having the original VM staying behind if they need to troubleshoot. If we look into another migration that we have going on that many customers use is what's called a replication-assisted vMotion migration. What this is doing specifically is what's called, we seed or we replicate the VM, and then we're going to wait for a cutover window. You can do this for bulk migrations as well. Many customers will use this type of migration if they have a very large VM with a lot of data, say 10 terabytes, for example. If I know that I have a cutover outage that I need to take on a Friday or a Saturday, I know that based on my algorithms and my numbers that the migration, I can't fire this migration off on a Friday. It's not going to finish by Sunday. So I need to seed this migration ahead of time, let the VMs continue to replicate back and forth, and then perform a cutover. So with replication-assisted vMotion, I can also set this seed checkpoint. What this also means is if the network extension were to cut, or if the interconnects were to disconnect, when I pick the connection back up, that seed checkpoint is going to pick up replication from where it left off instead of starting over from 0. Now as we go back, I can see that my vMotion is now at 27%. Things are starting to move, is my bet. And I can still see that the pings are still between, they're still sub-millisecond here. But if I go into my vSphere, my vCenters here, I can see that the relocation of Linux 002 has begun. And I can also see it on my destination vCenter that this migration is beginning to happen. As I go back, we can see that the ping went from .382, now we're at 22.6. So this VM has now moved into a different data center and I haven't dropped a packet. It's continuing to go on. So those customers that know their latencies as far as their applications, if my application people come back to me and say, hey, I can handle 50 milliseconds, anything under that's going to be fine. I can now perform a live migration on a Wednesday and move this application over and I don't have to take an outage.
Now, as we think about this at scale, for customers that have a large number of VMs to migrate, the idea is that HCX is giving you the options to migrate your different tiers of applications and virtual machines, right? Many customers that run at scale, you're going to have your business critical virtual machines. Those are the ones that you're probably going to want a vMotion. For the other lower tier workloads, you're going to save those for this bulk migration. And it's really meant to be able to address all tiers of your workloads so that when you go to migrate at scale, you have a plan for everything.
Exactly. And speaking of that, earlier today, I created a web application migration group. So this is how you can group things. And I created another RAV migration. And you can see here that right now these VMs are going to stay in this state waiting for a cutover in a couple days. So what this is going to do is going to sync the deltas when it comes to that window, then it's going to bring the VMs over, but until then, these VMs can stay as they are, and there's not going to be any impact to the environment, there's not going to be an impact to the application, they're just going to sit there in queue. If you want to see that they are sitting there in queue, as you scroll down, you can see that I've got Linux 5, Linux, and Linux 4 sitting at 98% at the source, and at the destination, they're also sitting here at 96%, waiting for that cutover, and they'll stay that way until the window opens, and then we're able to move the rest of the VMs there.
Sean, what happens in that cutover window?
So what happens in that cutover is we're dealing with snapshots as well. So when we begin to move it, we're going to snapshot the VM one last time, make sure that everything's healthy. Then once we know that it is healthy with the health checks that HCX gives, we're then going to delete that snapshot, we're going to move the VM over, and then we're going to remove all of the old VM information on the source. And so that's one thing where customers rather use bulk. If they need that protection, they will not use replication assisted because the source VM has been moved and there's nothing left behind. So that's how that happens. And then if you have to go through an audit with your team, you can then view the history of all the migrations via this dashboard. And this is where you can give your team's migration overviews. You can also do additional troubleshooting via alerts and things of that nature. Behind the scenes, as we go into the interconnect, this is what your service mesh will look like. And these are all the different appliances that you have. The one thing that you want to keep in mind, if you're not going to use network extension, if you have a direct connect already between your two sites, you don't need WAN optimization. And then if you're not going to be using any conversion of an operating system that is not vSphere to another, you also don't need to deploy the OS-assisted migration. So the only required appliance is your interconnect. All the other ones that you see here are optional. As you can see, the VMs have been moved over. The application, the VM is still pinging. And now I'm just going to wait for the weekend when my boss can tell me that I can move the rest of my VMs. Other than that, we're in a healthy state.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Steve. Now, as we go back to the slide, here we are. So do we have any other questions from the audience around migrations and best practices, anything you want to know regarding moving VMware workloads at scale?